Welcome to the Construction Disruption Podcast, where we uncover the future of design, building, and remodeling.
I'm Ryan Bell of Isaiah Industries, manufacturer of specialty metal roofing and other building materials. Today, my co-host is Todd Miller. Todd, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Well, actually, I may need to take that back.
Okay.
So I woke up this morning to an email from my life coach. She said I didn't make the team. Now, you would think after 61 years I would make the team, but anyway. Okay, that was my joke of the day. Sorry.
Nice.
I am doing great, Ryan, and I hope you are too.
Yes, I am doing fantastic. Looking forward to this episode. Before we dive in, I do want to mention we are playing our Challenge Words game, so be on the listen for some words that may sound like they're a little out of the blue or don't fit in, and we will reveal those at the end. You ready to get started, Todd?
Yes, I am. Let's go. I'm looking forward to today's guest. This will be a great show, so thank you.
Let's dive in. Well, today's guest is world-renowned communication expert, author, and keynote speaker, Marcus Sheridan. Marcus helps brands, sales teams, and leaders establish more trust with their audiences. With over 13 years of experience in the speaking industry and 23 years as an entrepreneur, Marcus has honed his craft as a master communicator, helping individuals and organizations transform the way they connect, engage, and influence. His best-selling book, They Ask, You Answer, is not just a methodology, it's a movement that's reshaping how organizations engage with their audiences. Marcus, it's great to have you on the show today. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here, Ryan. It's going to be a fun conversation. I got a good vibe about this one.
Awesome. Good. That's a good way to start. So we had one of your colleagues, Chris Dupre, on our show back in 2023, a few years ago. It's episode 94, I believe. It was a great episode. I'll make sure to link to that in the show notes. But for any of our listeners who might not be familiar with you or your book, could you kick us off by sharing a little bit about your background and kind of how you stumbled into this world of inbound sales and content marketing?
Yeah, I'll give the quick 101. I started a pool company, a fiberglass pool company with a couple buddies in 2001. I was right out of college, and we literally started out of the back of a pickup truck, and things were going okay. We started to grow the company, but then 2008, 2009 happened. We had the big crash, and a lot of pool companies went out of business. We thought we were going to go out of business, and we were literally weeks away from bankruptcy. But the cool thing about, in this case, pain and suffering, is it forces us to do that which we've never done before, right? It's that YOLO mindset when you have pain and suffering. And that's what's funny too about tough times is they create strong men, but they also create great marketing and innovation. And so when you see dips in the market, that's when you see innovation occurring, because you're just like, I just got to try this thing. I got to do this. I got to send it. I got to do whatever it takes to save my business. And that's when I really started to learn about the internet, about inbound, about content. And what I really took from what I was learning, Ryan, was, if I just obsess over my customers' questions, fears, worries, concerns, and I'm willing to address those online, I might save my business. So I said to my two business partners, we're going to become the Wikipedia of pools. We're going to be like the WebMD of what we do. And we literally, I remember brainstorming one night all the questions I had ever received as a sales guy, because I was doing most of the sales for us. And I had like a couple hundred questions about fiberglass swimming pools that I had written down. And then over the next couple of years, I addressed those online, on our website, on YouTube, and we became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. Saved the business. We exploded. We ended up starting to manufacture pools because we had so much growth and we had so much lead flow from outside of our area in Virginia. And so by 2017, we started manufacturing fiberglass pools, and then we became the fastest growing manufacturer of fiberglass pools in the U.S. We became the first franchise of fiberglass pools in the world. And in 2020, 2021, I actually sold the manufacturing side of the business And I still own the original river pools in Virginia. So essentially, I'm a franchisee of the larger franchisor today. And over the course of this entire journey, I wrote a book called They Ask, You Answer, which is essentially a framework of how you become the most known and trusted brand in your market by being radically transparent and honest and giving buyers exactly what they want. And it's a crazy ride. And it came out in 2017. It did very well. The second edition came out in 2020. And now in 2025, we've got the third edition, but it's called Endless Customers, which is the third edition of the book. And its whole purpose is to show companies how to become the most known and trusted brand in their market. And I also today have a company that helps organizations implement this system. It's called Impact, and it's been a lot of fun. So it's been a crazy ride, man. Never dreamt, first of all, I never dreamt I'd be a pool guy, and I never dreamt I'd be speaking around the world talking about this stuff. And I didn't know what the word serial entrepreneur even meant, right? But this is what's happened over the course of time. That's the beauties of life.
I have to throw something in here real quick. So I'm not sure that a lot of our audience truly understands how revolutionary what you did was. And interestingly, I was following you back with River Pools even before you wrote They Ask, You Answer. And I was seeing things written about you. I think maybe you had a blog, but there were some things going on that I was reading about you. And what you were doing was pretty revolutionary, because anyone who typically does an in-home sales item, you don't answer those questions until you get in the home, because that's your fear. What am I going to have to say? So I'm curious. I know Ryan's got a lot more questions here, but what is your first response to that person who does in-home sales and says, well, I can't answer this stuff before I'm there because I'm going to spill all my candy. I won't have anything to share. How do you respond to them?
Yeah, I think it's a really legitimate question. And I am super familiar with in-home selling. Obviously, I did it for, almost a decade of my own life. And I taught a lot of companies to do it as well. And I will tell you this, a couple things that you got to understand about this. Number one, to that person, I would say, do you believe in the golden rule? Do you believe in it? And of course, the golden rule is treat others as you yourself would want to be treated. To be a world-class marketer and to generate more leads and more trust than anybody in your space has ever done, you have to become very self-aware in terms of how you buy, what drives you, what motivates you, what inspires you, what makes you click on something, what makes you buy something, what makes you fill out a form, all these things. And so when someone becomes very, very self-aware, I'm able to say to them, so if you had the choices, would you want to understand these things before somebody came to your home? And of course, the answer is, well, yes. Of course I would. And so we'll talk about what those things are. But what we know is that when you ignore these things, you end up eliminating just a mountain of leads and ultimately business that you would have gotten. But you don't know you lost those because you hedged. You refuse to give the buyer what they wanted. Because what we know today is that the average buyer is 80% through the buyer's journey before they reach out to a company. And so what this basically means is buyers, consumers, they're researching to death. We're all like Infowars at this point. We can get whatever we want, whenever we want, and we want that information and we want it up front as much as possible. Okay. And so because we're doing so much legwork, by the time we actually talk to a salesperson, we're most of the way home. Now, are there exceptions to that? Yes, of course. But generally speaking, we're most of the way home. This is why everybody that's listening to this right now has talked to a salesperson in the last year where you could tell you knew more than the salesperson knew about the thing that they were selling because you had done more research than they had done on that particular niche thing that you were interested in, right? And so this isn't going away. This is only going to grow, especially with AI and the immediacy of answers and information. That's where we're all headed. And so I tend to go where the puck is headed, not where the person is holding the stick, right? Because that's where we need to be as businesses. And if you understand how buyers are becoming more informed than ever, then you say, all right, I've got to win the 80%. I've got to become the most known and trusted while they're vetting and researching online. Whether it's with AI, whether it's with Google, whether it's with their friends, whatever it is, I need to become that voice of trust in that moment and get recommended by that friend, by that Google, by that AI, so that they come to us. And so if you ignore these things, you will not be recommended by AI. You will not be recommended by Google. You may be recommended by a friend who has already worked with you. That to me is not acceptable. I'm not going to take 1 out of 3. No, sir. And so that's why you have to say we're going to own that 80%. And you can only do it by talking about the things that the buyer wants to know. And what's cool about this is most businesses refuse to talk about those things on the front end, which gives you an extreme advantage.
It's interesting that you mentioned AI. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was, there's a lot of talk in the SEO world right now about, well, SEO is dead, which I don't believe, but how Google is, replacing search results with an AI generated response where they're pulling info from where they find it on the web and giving it directly in search results, instead of a searcher needing to go visit a website, for example, and then finding a brand that way. Any advice or insights on?
I got strong opinions. I got very strong opinions on this. Okay,
let's hear it.
So let's just lay it out for everyone. Is SEO dead? No, of course it's not dead right now, but it is evolving dramatically. Now, is Google dead? No. Is Google going to die? There's a decent chance that Google, as we know it, will die. So let's talk about each one real quick.
Okay.
All right. For 25 years, we have learned how to use this tool called Google. And it was one of the most extraordinary marketing tools we've ever seen. Absolutely extraordinary. And for the most part, especially early on, if you talked about the right things, if you used the right words, if you said the right things, you could show up in Google. And the big goal was to be ranked number 1 in Google. What does being ranked number 1 in Google mean today? Well, 10 years ago, it meant that 82% of all people would click on that first blue link that was number 1 in search engine results. That's what it meant 10 years ago. What does it mean today? It doesn't actually mean jack squat. And I'll tell you why. Because if you do a search today for, best remodelers, like Lafayette, or best remodelers, Richmond, Virginia, or whatever the thing is, what's going to happen is the first thing you might see is an AI summary, which takes up a lot of the page. Next thing you might see is a bunch of sponsored links. Now, of course, Google, becoming desperate to drive revenue, and of course to be nefarious, they've tried to make the sponsored links look like regular organic search results, right? They're trying to trick everyone into thinking that's not a sponsored. They're forced to say it's sponsored, but they're trying their hardest so that you don't know really that that's a sponsored search result. And then after that, you've got related questions, right, that are going to show on the screen. And then after that, you might have your Google map with businesses on it. And then, of course, that's becoming more and more sponsored and less organic, if you will. And then after that, you might have a few videos. And then finally, you've got the company that ranks first for that particular phrase. And this is a problem for a lot of folks. You've literally, if you're ranked number 1 in Google search results, you've got to scroll 3 times almost through. In other words, you've got to see the screen 3 times and scroll past it before you get to that number 1 ranking. Most of the time. Of course, there's exceptions. What the world? So that's what's changed. Now, because of this, too, what's happening is more and more companies are saying, gosh, we're not doing as well with SEO as we used to. And so we've got to put money into paid. And every single contractor I've talked to this year that does paid Google ads is telling me we're spending more and we're getting less, which is obvious because what happens is you're seeing businesses have to put more into it. And see, I think it's wild to watch for me from my point of view, because what's happening here is Google is holding on to the past. Their core business model is they make billions a year off of ads. But if we're being really, really honest, do you think the future of search is you being forced to look at ads? The future of search is what we might call zero click. And zero click is when, right now, 50% of all searches on Google alone, end up with no click. In other words, they're not clicking the blue link. And so what's happening is you might say, I don't get it. My search rankings are as good as they've ever been, and my traffic is 60% what it was last year. Guess what? It's going to be 50% next year. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't pay attention to SEO. This doesn't mean that you don't pay attention to Google. What it means is the influence is going to be less and less over time. It also means that if you look at the UX, the user experience of searching on Google versus if you're really familiar with some of these AI platforms like a ChatGPT, I can tell you right now, I got tons of friends that have already moved over from Google to ChatGPT. And the most ridiculous stat that you hear from people is actually more people than ever are using Google. That may be true, but I can tell you more folks than ever are leaving Google right now. And companies are struggling to generate business more than they have in a decade from Google because of everything that's going on. And so what this means is your future is going to be contingent upon your ability to be recommended by 3 entities. I mentioned them earlier. You got to be recommended by the customer. That will never change, folks. You've got to be recommended by Google. That will change because their importance to you is going to diminish over time. All right. And I'm not saying exactly when, but I think there's a very strong argument that within 7 years that the number one revenue stream for Google itself is going to be YouTube because, of course, they own YouTube. And YouTube is actually gaining in importance as traditional search is less important. Oh, by the way, the AI can now search videos, not just the titles, but everything within the video to show that just like a textual search result in the past. And so no longer that's a hindrance. And I'm sure we'll talk about more about video and YouTube here in a minute. And so we do this, you've got to be recommended by Google and you've got to be recommended by AI. But so much of your success as a contractor in the future, or someone that's in home services or in the trades, is going to be contingent on, does AI recommend you? And the only way AI is going to recommend you is if you're sending a crap ton of signals out to the marketplace, digital signals, that essentially say this is a company worthy of being recommended. And when we say signals, what we're talking about is everything that's online produced by you or written or produced about you. So every single review that is ever produced online by, let's say, Google in this case, or some other review, that is going to be a signal to AI. Every piece of content you produce, that's going to be a signal to AI. Everything that's on social, it's going to be a signal to AI. Everything that's on video, YouTube, it's going to be a signal to AI. The more signals you get, the stronger you are, and the more you're going to be recommended by everyone, all 3 of those characters. So that continues to be true. But Google is like building a house on sand. And for 2,000 plus years, we've known you do not build your house on sand. So do not build your whole marketing on Google Ads and on Google Search. And I'm not saying don't pay attention to it, but don't listen to any SEO company that tells you that Google will not be affected and that SEO is the same as it's always been, because that person is being intellectually dishonest, and I would not do business with that person if I were you.
So, I mean, I have started switching over to asking ChatGPT for something instead of Google.
Yeah.
And I get an answer quicker. If it's something like deep research, Perplexity is fantastic. And I'm really starting to see the value and how quick I can get what I need by using AI. So, and really, if I understand correctly what you just said, the strategy behind SEO is creating content and putting information out there so that you show up in search results. That same underlying strategy is still there and what's necessary to show up for AI, correct?
Yeah, that part has not changed.
Yeah.
And what buyers want to know has not changed. which is why, if you take They Ask You Answer, my first book, written in 2017, it is still very foundational to what a content strategy should look like. But keep in mind, there's content and there's signals. And we can't just produce content. We've got to create signals, right? So for example, you're not writing your own reviews, but that's content. That's a signal,
Sure.
right? That's a signal that we got to drive towards. In other words, to get that recommendation by AI. People listening to this right now cannot even fathom the influence AI recommendations are going to have on their business in the future. It's very hard because, a great phrase is you can't fit the future in the containers of the past. And so the problem is you got folks that are thinking about their historical perspective of what they've experienced with the internet over the course of the last 25 years. And they're thinking that's going to be the run rate for what AI is. And let me tell you, more has happened since November of 2022, which, we're talking 2.5 years now, than happened like from a tech and from a marketing perspective in the previous 20 years. I'm not exaggerating because I've been in this game for that long. And I'm telling you, I've never seen the rate of change like this. It is a full-time job just to try and keep up with the developments from day to day. You can't possibly do it. There's no way you can possibly do it, which is why total tangent moment, right? It's why it's like going to college today for marketing is the biggest waste of time in the history of Earth. Because as it was, college taught antiquated marketing principles. Now, they're not even in the same hemisphere, not even in the same universe because of the rate of evolution that's occurring with the way that the buyer is changing, the way that marketing is changing, the way that lead generation is changing. All these things are changing so fast that if you send your kid to college to learn this, what is wrong with you?
I agree completely.
Good point.
So you mentioned lead generation there. We keep hearing it's getting, becoming tougher and tougher to acquire new customers or generate leads. Any insights into that? Or
does a bear poop in the woods, Ryan? I have plenty of thoughts on lead generation today. Let me just give you a few. Now, in my new book, Endless Customers, there's 4 pillars that the book is built around. The 4 pillars of a known and trusted brand. Okay. And the 3rd pillar is sell in ways others aren't willing to sell. Now, I share that because one of the greatest ways that you can generate leads today is you meet the buyer where the buyer is when it comes to the way they want to buy and therefore evolve the way you sell. And so how can you sell in ways that no one else is selling in your industry? Which, by the way, folks in the trades love to say they sell differently. Most don't at all. They just are so protective of their special sauce that is their sales process. And I watch it because I've seen hundreds and probably thousands at this point. I'm like, do you really think that is that different? So let me give you some examples of what's very, very different and incredible for lead gen. So there's a stat from Gartner that they sent me that is this: 75% of all buyers today say they would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. I'll repeat so that it lands with your audience. 75% of all buyers today say they would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. Now, this doesn't mean we hate salespeople. It just means we do not want to talk to a salesperson until we feel like we're good and ready, until we're comfortable, until we're confident, until we're assured that, hey, I'm not going to make a mistake. I'm not going to be taken advantage of, right? Now, salespeople or CEOs, businesses will hear this and they're like, I just wish it was the way that it used to be. Well, guess what? It's not going back to that point in time. And so you can either complain about the trend and say, I want it like it was before, or you can say, you know what, here's an opportunity. And the way I always see trends is, okay, it doesn't help to complain about it. The only thing that I can do is take advantage of this particular trend, this change in behavior in the market. So if buyers are saying that I want a seller-free experience, what they're essentially saying is I want control. The way you can give them control is through this thing that we call self-service. And self-service is when you provide interactive experiences or tools online that allow someone to get answers that previously they would have gotten by talking with a human, But instead, now they can get that answer and feel like, I'm more informed, I'm more confident, I'm more comfortable. And so in the book, we talk about five what is self-service tools that you can use to really revolutionize your sales process. I'll just name a couple of them here. So an example of one is a self-selection tool. Self-selection is when someone is trying to make a choice and they need a recommendation. So to give you an example of this, if you went to my Riverpool's website right now, you would find that there is a tool right there on the homepage that helps you choose between fiberglass, concrete, and vinyl liner in-ground pools. And it's an interactive questionnaire, essentially, that it asks you a series of questions, and then based on your answers, it gives you a recommendation of a type of pool that best fits your needs. What's crazy is every single day, we have dozens and dozens of people take this, and we recommend to these dozens of people, many of them, don't buy our pool. In fact, you should buy a concrete pool, and here's why. You should buy a vinyl liner pool, and here's why. Yeah, that's pretty gutsy. It's pretty ballsy. Nobody does it. We do it because our obsession is to be the most known and trusted brand in the world at what we do. So that's one example. It's a self-selection tool. So you could think of like, how often does somebody say to you, hey, I'm trying to choose between this and this. So for example, as a metal roofing manufacturer, there's different types of product that you sell. And so there's different options that the homeowner or the contractor could choose. A smart tool would be, hey, what is the best type of metal roof for me? And then through a series of questions, they get a recommendation. Okay, that's an example of what that would look like when it comes to metal roofing. Another powerful example of a self-service tool is a self-scheduling tool. Now, I'm about to share something with you that sounds like mind-bendery, but it's incredibly powerful. Now, what's not exceptional or what's not mind-bendery is when you allow someone to schedule time with a salesperson on your website. That in and of itself is not extraordinary, but here's where it gets extraordinary. So that's the scheduling part. But when you offer this tool, a self-scheduling tool that allows someone to choose time on your website to meet with someone. They weren't forced to talk to a human. They weren't forced to fill out a form. They just chose the time to meet with a human. But when you allow them a selection of humans to talk to, and then they can choose their own salesperson, here's what happens every time. Closing rates double. My team at Impact, we help build these tools, and we've had some crazy experiences with this, and we keep seeing it over and over again. Closing rates double. So let's just be hypothetical. Let's say you had a successful home contracting business, and you've got 4 different salespeople. And so you have this ability for someone to schedule time with a salesperson on your website, and they go to this particular page and they see the 4 salespeople. They get to see their images. They get to read a bio about them. They get to watch a video about each one of them. And then they get to choose who they want to work with. Now, do you think when that person's walking up their doorstep, they're more invested in that person? Of course they are. Are they more likely to buy from that person? Yes, because there's this thing called the sunk cost fallacy, which means the more time we spend engaged, invested in something, the harder we try to make it work. And so if someone chooses their own salesperson, guess what? They try to figure out a way to buy from that person. That's how it goes. Now, this sounds crazy to folks, but it works, and I've seen it work in multiple industries. Now, let me tell you one more example of a self-service tool. And there's 5 told in the book, so make sure you get the book and read about it. By the way, the book is at endlesscustomers.com, okay? Endlesscustomers.com if you're listening to this right now. The next one, and this is the most important for any home services business and for manufacturers too, okay, is self-pricing tools. Self-pricing tools. Now, we can go into the whole conversation of pricing here in a minute, but the first conversation someone has, or the first question they have when they enter the buyer's journey. So let's say the buyer's journey starts the moment they say, I have a need, I have a problem, I need a new roof, I need to add an addition to my home, I need new siding, whatever it is. So the second they make that decision and they say, I need this, the first question they have is always the same question.
Absolutely.
Do y'all have a sense of what it is?
What's it going to cost?
What's it going to cost? And the way we ask that in that moment, Todd, usually sounds something like this. So, like, what's this going to set me back? Like, what are we roughly looking at here? So really what they want is they want a general feel for how much am I going to spend. They don't need exact yet, but they need a general feel. That's the first question in the buyer's journey. Then they go through the research process. Then they research companies. They decide on who to reach out to. Then they start to reach out to said companies. Then they have a sales appointment. And then the final question they ask is, okay, so exactly how much is it going to cost? So you start with the question, roughly, how much is it going to cost? And you end with the question as a buyer, exactly how much is this going to cost? And so what's crazy is businesses every year literally lose hundreds, if not thousands of leads because they refuse to address the most fundamental question everyone starts with. Hence the need for what I would call a pricing estimator tool on your website. Now, how does this work? Well, there's two different ways that you can do it. You can build custom estimators, which are more, let's call it interactive and fancy. Example of one is you see river pools. Okay. I built one for a company called Shasta Pools. My company impacted Shasta Pools. Let me give you a quick stat on Shasta Pools. Just blow your mind. So Shasta Pools came to me and they said, Marcus, we're getting ready to go into our busy season. It's April. This was 2023. They said it's April, and the next 90 days we're going to sell 75% of our pools for the year. We got to crush it. Do you think we should do this they ask you answer thing that you wrote about? And I said, you should do it, but it's not going to help you very much in the next 90 days. I said, but looking at your site, looking at your business, what would help you dramatically in the next 90 days is a pricing calculator estimator on your website. They said, well, gosh, there's no way we could do that. I said, of course you could do that. They said, like, nobody's ever done that with concrete pools. I said, I'm telling you, you could do it. And it's going to just revolutionize things for you. Make a long story short. The year before the month of May, the year before they had this estimator put up, they got about 175 leads that month. All right. May of 2023 was better for home improvement than May of 2024 was. May of 2024, their calculator goes live. Their estimator goes live. That month, they got roughly 750 leads. So they went from 175 to 750. Bottom line on their business was well into the millions. Well into the millions.
Absolutely.
That estimator cost them about $20,000. $20,000. Okay. Like I said, my company Impact built that. Now, so much is this going to affect the entire industry, like all of home services, any service-based businesses, manufacturers too. I said, this is a mega trend and there's a void here. So last year, I created a separate software company called Price Guide. PriceGuide.ai is the name of the company. And what Price Guide does, it allows any service-based business, and it's especially focused towards home services, to create a working pricing estimator in 30 minutes or less on their website. Now, of course, it uses AI to help you build this estimator, the whole thing, the whole experience. It uses the AI and you can modify all the questions, the variables or the amounts, you put those in. And then what happens is, just like if I came to you all right now and I said, I'm getting ready to do a big metal roofing project. Could you give me a rough sense as to what that might cost? You would say, okay, well, we got a series of questions for you, Marcus. You might say, is this a commercial or residential? You might say, all right, what's the square footage that we're looking at? Then you might say, what specific type of metal roofing would you want? And then you might say, now there's some options that you can get with this. Would you want any of these? And I would answer the questions. And at the end, you would say, okay, well, based on that, Marcus, roughly, I think you're going to be somewhere between, $50,000 and $65,000. And I'd say, okay, that was super helpful. Thank you. Okay. Now you can mimic that exact same experience with a pricing estimator using Price Guide. So you build out those questions, you put in your variables, and then at the end, it gives you a range. It's an estimate. And so here's what we found, because now I've got hundreds of home service companies that are using this. I think it's going to be the HubSpot of pricing estimators. And I believe within the next 5 years, 90% of all home service companies are going to have a pricing estimator on their website. But here's what we found. What I found is over and over again, what the data tells us is if somebody puts this on their homepage, okay, and they use the phrase, get instant estimate. Okay, that's the phrase. Get instant estimate. That's your call to action. Takes them immediately to the estimator. What we see every time is a 300 to 500% increase in leads from that day forward. So 3 to 5x more leads. So for example, if you're listening to this right now and you're getting 5 leads a week from your website, if you put an estimator on there like Price Guide, you're going to start to get 15 to 25 a week is what you're going to do if you're currently getting 5 a week. It's extraordinary. And contractors love it. Homeowners love it. And you build way, way more leads. Now, some of these leads are not as qualified. Some of these leads are actually more qualified. So you get the whole gamut of leads. For the ones not as qualified, you can remarket them, you can nurture them for later, and you'll see a year later they come back to you and they say, hey, I did that thing, right? Like, for example, we had a lot of folks with Shasta experience a lot of folks coming in saying, I'm working with you because you were the only one that allowed me to get a sense for pricing beforehand. They hear it all the time. And so this is the future of home services. That's a self-pricing tool, and it's incredibly powerful. That's why if you're listening to this, you could add Price Guide to your site tonight and start getting leads tonight that you're not currently getting today. And why anybody would not do it, I don't know. But out of all the people listening to this right now, 5 to 10% will do what I just said, and the rest will say, that's wild. I don't think we could do that.
So I'm curious what your advice would be. I understand how that price estimating tool works for the ultimate retailer. What would your advice be for a manufacturer who is wondering how transparent can I get?
River Pools is a manufacturer, right?
Exactly.
And so what our business, like many manufacturers, is B2B2C. So we sell to a business, a dealer or franchisee, who then sells to a homeowner. And so we don't set the end price. So how in the world can we have an estimator? Well, it's called an estimator for a reason. Now, the estimate can be as big as you want it to be. So it's not uncommon for someone to do the estimator on our website on River Pools, and they will get a range of, okay, so based on what you just said, it looks like your pool's going to be somewhere between $120,000 to $160,000. Now, somebody might say, gosh, that's a big range. Yeah, but that is way more than any other manufacturer is willing to give.
Absolutely.
So the homeowner really, really appreciates it. And most of them understand, like, oh, okay. Now somebody might say, well, are they going to anchor themselves on the lower number? Well, you got some people that might anchor themselves on the lower number, but a lot of people are going to realize, okay, we hear all the time, well, that's roughly what I thought it was going to be because you said this is roughly what it's going to be, right? I mean, you did the thing. So it's great for salespeople. They don't have shock and awe anymore. I mean, they just don't experience that. And it's just way, way better, for that reason. This is, again, though, this is the future. This is where everyone is headed. I have a shed manufacturer in Scotland. It's crazy. They were doing, they're called Gillies and McKay, and they manufacture the shed. And they sell it locally and they sell it regionally through dealers as well. And they had already so much cost content on their website. They had cost pages that explained the cost of their products. They had pricing videos like we teach with They Ask You Answer Now, endless customers. They even had a price list on their website. And they came to me and they said, we want to add your pricing estimator tool. And I said, okay, you can add it. I'm not sure it's going to make much of a difference because you already have a price list for your sheds on your site. So I don't know if it's going to make a difference. Well, it made a 400% difference.
Wow.
And immediately, and here's what we found. I think once again, it goes back to sunk cost fallacy. When the person was able to essentially feel like they were building out their shed, they were invested more in it, and they felt like they owned said shed, which meant they converted and many of them bought. So they're well over $1 million in rev from that tool, right? Price Guide costs $200 a year, not a month, a year. I mean, that's a joke for the lead gen that it produces. And that's what's so amazing about technology and AI today. You can, and again, my company builds custom ones. My company Impact builds these, but if we're going to build it custom, it's probably going to be about $20,000. Or you can go Price Guide, and you can do one that's not fully custom, but it's still like a powerful experience, $200 a year. Either one of the two you need to do. Some people should do the custom one. Most people in home improvement, though, that are listening to this right now, they should just do something like a price guide. And it's going to make a huge difference. And I could talk about a bunch more examples of selling in a way others aren't willing to sell. And I'll mention one that we're doing right now with river pools. Is what we know is that if you immediately call a lead within 5 minutes versus waiting 30 minutes. So let's say you have a standard of everybody gets a call within 5 minutes that reaches out, or you wait 30 minutes or more. The chances that you have a conversation with the lead increase by 900% if you talk to them within the first 5 minutes. Now, most people listening to this right now, if I ask them, how quickly do you call a lead that reaches out to your company? There's going to be a lot of people that say, well, usually within 24 hours. No longer is that acceptable in 2025. So what we are now doing with river pools, and this goes live actually this week, and I've seen it work with other companies, and I'm doing it with my own now. So the moment somebody fills out a form on the site and says, hey, I'm interested in a quote, they immediately get a call from AI. Now, the AI sounds very, very human, but the AI says, hi, I'm an AI assistant from River Pools. You just filled out a form on our site, and my purpose for this call is to schedule a time with you and one of our salespeople. Can we quickly do that together? That's what the AI does. And it sounds incredibly human. It says that it's AI, so it's not nefarious, it's not dishonest, but it's crazy how real it feels. And its whole goal is to schedule that time, because 78% of the time when it comes to home services, the first contractor they talk to wins the business. Not the first contractor that emails them, not the one that leaves a voice message. It's the one they have a full conversation with. Roughly 3 out of 4 times they will go with you. So the whole goal today is you have to be first, the first one they talk to. So we want them to be the first they learn from during that 80% of the journey. And then once they reach out to companies, we want them to be first to talk to us and have that full conversation with. Therefore, we're going to win now the majority of the time. That's how you dominate. But that's also how you use AI and create an incredible experience and sell in a way that nobody else is willing to sell. Folks, today, you don't need to spend thousands of dollars on call center employees if you want to be immediate with your ability to return calls and get back to leads. You can do this with AI. You can do it at a fraction of the cost. You can do it incredibly, incredibly well, and they can schedule the time with the salespeople, and the homeowner loves it.
Good stuff. I'm sitting here thinking, if people just listen to this podcast, their businesses will never be the same. And you have such tremendous insight and advice and folks aligning themselves with you. And I'm thinking a little bit about, I don't know if you've heard about this thing this baseball season called the torpedo bat. The Yankees started using it, and now some other teams are using it. The torpedo bat, until MLB decides to outlaw it, is going to revolutionize baseball. Just like what you're doing is revolutionizing sales.
Yeah, I don't know if you recall, it was the third game of the season. The Yankees hit 9 jacks that day, and like the rest of the league was like croaking at them, literally saying like how can I experience that myself? Just like sitting there watching them, like you're at dinner and you're eating some great food and your dog is looking at you, just salivating, saying, I really wish that I could have some of those biscuits right now. The whole league was sitting there looking at the Yanks and saying, give me some of those freaking torpedoes, like right now, I want that in my clubhouse, right? And of course, it's like the tush push. Now everybody's going to try to outlaw it. I'm saying, make the bats fatter. I want more jacks. You know what I'm saying?
There you go.
Yeah. I think it's only a matter of time before there's some tariffs put on them. So we'll see.
That could happen.
Yep.
That could happen. But hey, maybe we'll start building our own bats then and be better than ever. We'll see. We'll see.
I want to talk about your new book a little bit. Endless Customers. You mentioned it at the beginning. I think it's version 3 kind of from my understanding. Can you tell us a little bit about what's in it, how it's different from the other?
So They Ask You Answer is been a book that has been embraced deeply by those that are in home services, home improvement, manufacturers, because it's the most common sense marketing book you'll ever read. I don't say it because I wrote it. I say that because it's true, and that's what other people say about it. Hundreds of thousands of companies have read it and embraced it. But, when ChatGPT came out in November 2022, I knew the whole world was going to change. And instead of like many SEO companies pretending like Google is not going to change, and instead of pretending like everything that I wrote in They Ask You Answer isn't going to evolve, I said, time for part 3. Here we go. And the world had changed so much that I said it was time for a new title to the book as well. Because I want people to think endless customers long term. Biggest problem that people have today is getting more leads, more customers. And I wanted them to get an actual system that they could follow, one that was built to last at least for a decade. I'm not going to predict longer than a decade right now. It's impossible to do that, right? But like, how can you become, and this whole payoff of the book is, how can you become the most known and trusted brand in your market? That's what it shows you how to do. And the way it shows you how to do that is with 4 pillars. And I mentioned those, one of them, but I'll tell you what the 4 pillars are. Number 1, you've got to be willing to say online what other companies in your space are not willing to say. That's number 1. Okay. Number 2, you've got to be willing to show what others in your space aren't willing to show with video. Number 3, you got to be willing to sell in a way that others in your space aren't willing to sell. We give a bunch of examples of that just now. And number 4, you've got to be more human than others are willing to be. In other words, there needs to be a face that's recognizable, that people associate with the brand. You got to get from behind the desk and from behind the camera, and you got to get in front of the dang camera. And you can't sit there and make excuses for it, because we buy from those we know, like, and trust. That's never going to change. And generally speaking, with brand becoming more and more important as part of those signals here, folks, okay? Again, signals are everything. You need to build an extraordinary brand, a personal brand as the leader of your organization, and a business brand as well. You need to build them both. People generally align much more with the person than the business. Do you think more people know about Marcus Sheridan, or about Impact, or about Price Guide, or about River Pools? Those are 3 different companies of mine. Way more people know about Marcus Sheridan because of the influence that I have made on a personal level, the dent that I've made on the world, my little dent, right? And so that's the goal. And because I am a key person of influence, as my friend Daniel Priestley would say, that allows me to build these companies and use my brand to funnel energy into those brands. And now they can grow and they can prosper. And so you need to be willing to do that too. As a CEO, and you need to think big picture like that. But in terms of the first pillar, say what needs to be said, just really quickly, because I know we're starting to run out of time here, but I talked about this in They Ask You Answer, and it's still very prominent in Endless Customers, and that is, there's basically 5 subjects that every buyer wants to know before they reach out to a company. The stuff that they research every single time. There's 5 subjects, and we've learned these 5 subjects over the course of using the internet now for roughly 30 years. And that is, as buyers and consumers, we want to know cost and price. All right. That's number 1. We want to know problems/negatives. What could go wrong? What are the issues with it? Right. For example, one of the number 1 questions when it comes to metal roofing is, what are the problems with the metal roof? It's one of the number 1 questions, right? Because people that, when they get interested in buying something, they want to know what could go wrong with it. It's the same thing with a fiberglass pool. What are the biggest issues or problems with the fiberglass pool, right? So anybody that's in metal roofing sure as heck better own those conversations online. Third one, so your first one was cost and price. Second one's problems/fears or objections. Third one is comparisons. We love to compare stuff online, compare company versus company, brand versus brand, method versus method, option versus option. Fourth one is reviews. The thing about reviews, we don't just want good reviews. We want good, bad, and ugly reviews. That's how we surmise, really, is a company the real deal. And then finally, we want the best, the most. Think about how many times you've gone online and searched for the best, right? So these are, these are what we call in the book the Big Five. They run the economy of search. This is what people are searching now on AI. Most companies don't talk about these 5 subjects. And we teach you in Endless Customers exactly how you talk about cost and price, exactly how you can talk about the fears that they have, the negatives that you're afraid to address, exactly how you can compare yourself to your competitors and show up online for those best of lists and things like that. So it's very powerful. That's the Big Five. And that is key to saying what others aren't willing to say.
It's really interesting that you, the mention of people want to know what's going wrong with, or what could go wrong with the metal roof. I was just doing some keyword research in SEMrush yesterday, and that was one of the recommended pillars, content pillars. And it really kind of caught me off guard. It wasn't on my radar, but it was like disadvantages of metal roofing, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
and it really surprised me.
One of the best practitioners of They Ask You Answer, and I'm sure you've heard of them, this company called Sheffield Metals. They make metal roofs. And one of the first videos we ever helped them produce was, what are the problems with the metal roof? That video has over 500,000 views on YouTube. 500,000 views on YouTube. Simply because they were willing as a manufacturer to address a core question that the marketplace has. And you always have to say to yourself, do we want them to learn this from me, or do we want them to learn it from somebody else? Right. And my feeling is I want them to learn it from me. And if they're going to get even if they're going to get the answer from AI, I want AI to have gotten that answer from me, because then I can influence the conversation. So this is the way you got to think. But this is why the companies that have more of an abundant mindset, abundance mentality, they do much better with transparency, honesty, and gaining trust online than those that are coming from a place of scarcity. And they're saying, but if I mention my competitors, they'll buy from them. What the heck is wrong with you? If they want to know who your competitors are, they'll find out in about 2 seconds, right? It's like, give me a break. So it's like there's no secrets anymore. Consumer ignorance is no longer a viable sales and marketing strategy. Yeah, it was at one time. It's not anymore. So we got to move past that and say, okay, let's flip the script and let's give them exactly what they want. Again, what you would want. Golden rule, folks.
Amen.
Very good. One last question here. Any additional advice that you would give to any young entrepreneurs and innovators that are kind of looking to disrupt the construction industry?
I'll tell you a couple things real quick. Let me give you just a big overarching one. My mentor, Jim Rohn, used to always say, and everybody should be watching Jim Rohn on YouTube right now. He's old school, but he's glorious. He's wonderful. He would always say, to have more than you've got to come more than you are. And you got to learn to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. I about drove myself into the grounds of bankruptcy by working just hard because I wasn't working smart. It wasn't until I got really smart and started obsessing over the buyer that we flipped the script and the company took off, and ultimately it led me to this incredible place of financial peace, and I get to travel the world and teach people about it. So to have more than you got to become more than you are. You got to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. So I would urge you that, very, very strongly. I would also say that as a company, you need to start thinking, we're a media company. That's what we are. I got to show it. I got to show everything. Pull out your dang phone and start recording. Get over yourself. Get over whatever issues you have. Because the problem is you ask people for money. And the moment you said, I'm going to ask people for money in exchange for a good or a service, you lost the right to say, I'm just not going to do things like video. Because video is what the market wants to see. That's how they want to learn. And this is your future customers, I can assure you. If you've got teenagers, just watch them for 5 minutes, and that's who your customer is going to be in 10 years. You sure as heck better pay close attention to what's going on there. So you got to start to think like a media company. But listen, we break it down to Endless Customers. So make sure you get the book. It's endlesscustomers.com. Make sure you connect with me on LinkedIn because I'm a dang good follow over there. And that's where I put some of my best stuff that's where any thoughts that are coming to my mind, I test them out on LinkedIn first. And so check it out there. And I do hope that what we've said here really does have resonance with this audience today, because I know it changes lives. It changed my life, and it changes so many lives. Just the other day, I was speaking at a conference. A couple comes up to me. I've never seen them before that I can recall. They said, Marcus, we heard you in 2018. You made us millionaires, Marcus. And I said, really? Are you serious? And the husband leans in and Marcus, listen to me. I'm serious. You made us multi-millionaires. Thank you. You've changed our life. And that was because they took action. Most people don't take action. They hear the thing and they say, that sounds nice, but they don't do. So be a part of that 3 to 5%, if you're listening to this right now, that actually does something. Take action and you'll change your life.
Wow, great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Marcus, really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. Everything, all the knowledge you dropped. We truly appreciate it. For anybody that wants to get in touch with you or learn more about the new book, can you just say again what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, again, endlesscustomers.com for the book, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can message me there. I'll see it. Marcus at marcussheridan.com is a simple email to remember, Marcus at marcussheridan.com. And keep in mind, too, I speak at conferences, at events, to companies individually, and so if you're looking for someone that's just going to rivet your audience, I'm happy to come out and change some lives.
Awesome. And I will make sure to put those links in the show notes. One last thing, we need to recap our challenge words. We were all successful at getting them in. Marcus, your word was?
Groak, which means to gaze at someone while they eat their food. I feel like I slayed it.
You did. You nailed it.
You absolutely did.
Thanks to Todd for the setup with the torpedo bat. I was like, as soon as he said torpedo bat, I'm like, ding, ding, ding.
So torpedo was my word, which, that was awesome.
Yeah. And my word was tariff, which I think was kind of obvious, but maybe not.
Nope. Worked well.
Yeah, like the Yankees, we had back-to-back home runs right there all together with our magic word. So that was pretty fun.
Good job, guys.
It was such a serious and intense conversation. I was really kind of thinking we just weren't going to get to challenge words, but I'm glad we did. Well, thank you again, Marcus.
You're welcome.
And thank you to our audience for tuning into this episode of Construction Disruption with Marcus Sheridan. Please watch for future episodes of our podcast. We are always blessed with great guests. Don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Till the next time we're together, keep on disrupting and challenging those in your world to better ways of doing things. And don't forget to have a positive impact on everyone you encounter. Make them smile and encourage them. 2 simple yet powerful things we can all do to change the world. God bless and take care. This is Isaiah Industries signing off until the next episode of Construction Disruption.
This podcast is produced by Isaiah Industries, manufacturer of specialty metal roofing and other building products.